Thank you for joining us today for the Tennessee Farmers Market Vendor Boot Camp webinar series. I'm Hal Pepper with the Center for Profitable Agriculture, and our topic today is digital marketing trends. We're grateful to have you with us, and we appreciate my coworker, Jared Bruhin, a marketing specialist from the Center for Profitable Agriculture, joining us as today's instructor. We greatly appreciate the support provided by USDA Rural Development and Tennessee Department of Agriculture and the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets to help make this series possible. As some of you know, we planned a series of Farmers Market Vendor Boot Camp workshops to present the topics that we're covering this week. We presented 3 of those a few weeks ago, and we had to cancel the other 3 that we had scheduled because of the coronavirus. So we are presenting these topics now as webinars. We're glad that we have the technology available to do this, and to help report the impact of this webinar, I'll ask you to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end, and I'll post that link to the evaluation in the chat box at the end of today's webinar. And even if you've completed this evaluation yesterday, please go online and complete that evaluation again for us today so that we can report that impact. Just a few housekeeping items. Please leave your microphones on mute and your video off during the session. And if you would now locate the chat box, if you haven't already, please type your name and location into the chat box to help us record attendance. And Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program has said that attendance at all 4 webinars, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and Friday, will fulfill a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program requirement in the agritourism, fruit and vegetable, and value-added producer diversification sectors. So if you want your attendance to be documented for TAEP, please type in your name as it appears on TDA's list in the chat box. I'll post Erica's email address so that if you need to get in touch with her, you'll have her contact information as well. You can use your chat box at any time during the session to submit a question or make a comment, and Jared and I will monitor the chat box for your questions or comments during the presentation. Okay, we are recording this webinar. We plan to post it online at our Center for Profitable Agriculture website. Plan to have them posted next week in the event that you'd like to view it again or share it with somebody else. We're excited to have Jared Bruhin with us today. Jared's one of our 2 marketing specialists, and he's very knowledgeable about the subject of digital marketing trends. If there are no questions or comments at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Jared.
Thank you, Hal. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are in the state. We're very happy that you're able to join us for this call, and thank you for those that returned from yesterday's call. Hope you enjoyed that information as well. I'd like to echo what Hal said. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I have the chat box pulled up on a second monitor, so I'm constantly watching that. And if you have any questions that are timely, feel free to go ahead and put them in there, and I'll make sure to take a moment to stop and answer that question before I move on. Hopefully that is helpful for you. I know it's a little difficult not being able to be in person like we hoped to originally to be able to do these, but please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll make sure to address them. Little disclaimer here. I'm going to be talking about digital marketing trends. The information presented today is a little dated. You wouldn't say it's too dated, other than in terms of it being in the digital kind of world. And as we know, the internet and digital medias are changing constantly. So this information is a year or so old, but the trends and the topics that we're covering today still hold true. Just maybe some of the figures may not be as accurate or as current. But with that, we'll get started. And if I can get my slides. Okay, so it's pretty simple. If you're not on the web, you just aren't, right? So a percentage of American adults who use the internet based on a Pew Research Center study, found that 89% of American adults use the internet in 2018. And that number has increased dramatically from 2000, where less for about a quarter of Americans, adults, were using the internet. So it's really pretty true. If you're not already on the web, then you're missing out on a lot of information, whether that goes for personal, private, or even for marketing your business or your farm. So the game plan today is we're going to define what digital marketing is. We're going to talk through a lot of trends and some tips about how to use digital marketing and different resources and ways to keep up with ongoing trends and future trends as they emerge. So first off, what is digital marketing? Digital marketing is achieving marketing objectives through the application or applying digital technologies and media. This is going to be including managing different forms of online company presence, whether it be social media such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or an online internet page, web page where you house your company's information and maybe even a shop or something online. A little bit about marketing. I've got some information just about general marketing. I think that this is very important to understand who your target market is. Because when you identify who your target customers are and you develop specific strategies of how to reach them, that is going to ultimately drive the most sales with the least amount of expense or least amount of effort in terms of marketing expenses and marketing effort. So you need to be able to understand what your product is, what your positioning is in your market, what price point are you located at, where are you physically located, how are you promoting, and all of these things go into the customer values of what your target market is. This is a slide here to talk about a marketing plan. Many of you, I'm sure, are well aware of establishing a business plan for your business or for your farm. And the level of detail that is involved with establishing a business plan. There's just as many details and level of nuances that can go into a marketing plan if you choose to take that time. I highly encourage everyone to develop a marketing plan as a portion of their business plan, because ultimately it's going to generate sales. It's going to allow you to have a clear, succinct path of how you're trying to move forward to grow your sales, grow your business, promote your products, and things like that. So when I mentioned digital technologies and media, some things that we'll talk about are websites and being able to use websites, different social medias. We'll spend a lot of time talking about some of the different social media apps and social media websites available, blogs and kind of the benefits to using a blog online, using email and how to most effectively send emails, and lastly, the use of mobile applications. It's interesting to talk about search engine optimization. Depending on how much you know kind of about search engines like Google or Yahoo, and the way that they optimize the search. So if you just pull up Google and type in whatever you're looking for, as many of us do, Google has these algorithms in the background that are going to populate your top list, your top 10. So it's important to know where you as a marketer or you as a business would appear in somebody's search, right? So if somebody's looking for fresh strawberries and you are a fresh strawberry producer and they're looking for local fresh strawberries, if they Google that, does your company actually come up or does it not? And ultimately, we're going to want to get to a point, or you would like to get to a point where anybody in your local area that's searching for fresh strawberries sees your information first, and maybe not necessarily getting a Kroger ad or some other large retailer ad, but you'd like to see yourself optimized in that search engine so that you're appearing first. And other things would be using social media marketing. We'll talk about that. Online advertising can be done on social media as well as different search engines like Google. I'm sure anytime you Google something, the first several things you see are actually paid advertisements. They pay to be put at the top of that list. So that is an option as well. Email marketing, I mentioned, we'll talk about, and marketing automation as well. So we'll go through, spend a little bit of time talking about some trends and tips. We'll talk about the hottest platforms, some interesting trends, and some of the best practices when you're considering using these different applications. So it's really neat to think about the mobilization of society. That 95% of adults own a cell phone, and this is again as of 2018, and 77% own a smartphone. And many of you are well aware of the capabilities of smartphones these days, as numerous of you are on this call from a smartphone, and that would have been unheard of just a few years ago. We're going to talk a lot about demographics today. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about certain age groups, certain age demographics. So it's interesting to note that 94% of the younger generation, age 18 to 29, 94% of those have a smartphone, compared to less than half of people over 65 with a smartphone. They may have a cell phone, but they may not have a smartphone. And in terms of marketing online through social media, they may not be as easy to reach via a phone application, but maybe more so from a web-based, computer-based application. Something to think about when you're developing an online website, especially considering the mobilization and the prevalence of smartphones and phone technologies, is how does your website look if you're viewing it from a smartphone? Here's an example of Mercier Orchards. This is what their web page looks like on a phone. That doesn't look very good, does it? Right? You're missing out on a lot of information. You can't see all the tabs at the top of their page. You're missing out on the pictures off to the right because their web page was not optimized to be viewed on a mobile application. They have since updated their web page, and it now is mobile friendly, and you can view all of their tabs here and find information about them, and it looks a lot more clean and more user friendly. So they acknowledge the demand to have a mobile friendly web page, and they took the time and the money to get that addressed. So if that's something that you as a farm or as a business with an online web presence have not considered already, you may want to take some time to look at that. Pull your own web page up on your smartphone or on your tablet or something, just to see what it looks like, so you know what your customers are going to see as well. So the top 10 social networking sites, and this is as of January 2019, number one was Facebook, followed by YouTube and Twitter, and then Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, VK, Tumblr, Pinterest, and Google+. Now, when we did these workshops in person, I asked everyone if they'd heard of all of these, all 10 of these, and the only one that I've not actually heard of was VK, and I wasn't sure what it was. Maybe some of you know. I later found out that it was a Russian social media page, I guess a Russian Facebook, if you will, or something like that. So it probably makes sense that most of us don't know what that is, but they may be listening into us right now. So the estimated unique monthly visitors for each of these, and this is global, this is looking at the world population, 2.4 billion people are using Facebook at least on a monthly basis. This is including, I believe is including information related to if you have a business or a business page that is looking on there, then they also would be counted, I think, in this figure. 1.9 billion people are using YouTube. I certainly use YouTube a lot, especially for informational videos about how to anything from changing a part on my car to fixing my computer when it won't pull up, or anything in between. So a lot of information can be found on YouTube, and it's certainly a good resource, not only to market yourselves, but also to find additional information. Instagram has been growing very rapidly in the past few years. It is owned by Facebook, and I'll talk about that later. But it has its own unique benefits over Facebook, something to consider. And then Twitter and Pinterest kind of rounding out the top 5. So all are very good, and they all have their own unique benefits, pros and cons. So we'll talk about some of those coming up. The majority of Americans are using Facebook, we're seeing a percentage of adults who say that they use the following social media sites. This one actually has YouTube kind of plugged in a little bit higher, saying a larger percentage of people use YouTube, but Facebook is right there with them. Instagram, most notably, has grown very rapidly. We're seeing just a 7% increase from 2016 to 2018, and that's a pretty large growth. Facebook is kind of flattened out, but we're still seeing a lot of growth in Pinterest and Instagram. It's interesting to note that the typical American reported using 3 of the 8 platforms included in this study. So don't just think that you're going to reach everybody on one social media platform, but be willing and open to trying to manage multiple social media aspects as well, because people are using different ones. And again, there's different benefits to different social medias. The distribution of users on Facebook based on their age group and gender reveals that the majority of Facebook users are around 25 to 34. We are seeing, that's obviously a larger, it's 25%, so a quarter of Facebook users are in that age demographic. Certainly see a smaller percentage of people over the age of 65. This is a good slide, a good image to think about if you as a marketer are trying to reach a younger audience, then that's something to think about with how you're trying to approach who you're trying to market or where you're trying to reach them at. So thinking about in terms of age groups, who you might be trying to attract. This is a good slide to show you that most people on Facebook are probably around the age of I would say 25 to 40, or maybe even 20 to 45 or so is going to be your predominant group. Interestingly, people that use Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram and others use them on a numerous times a day. Looking at Facebook, the first one there, 74% of people reported that they use Facebook at least once a day, or they use it once a day, and half of them use it multiple times a day. Snapchat, interestingly, a very high percentage of people using it several times a day, but a lot of people on Snapchat either use it multiple times a day or don't really use it much at all. Instagram is the same way, that they're on it kind of a lot, or they're not on it as often. And then Twitter and YouTube have lower percentages of people using them daily, but they still kind of use them periodically. This is looking at teens, teenagers who are using the internet, either on a computer or a cell phone. In 2018, it was reported that almost 90% of teens were using the internet at least several times a day, and 45% of teens were almost constantly online. So that's a big change, a big shift from just 10 years ago. I remember growing up, we had dial-up internet, so it was unheard of to be on the internet very much. Certainly if we expected somebody to be calling the house, we weren't allowed to be on the internet. So certainly times have changed, and it reflects here in this image of the amount of people using the internet and the time that they spend on the internet. So this graphic here is showing the percentage of teens who say that they use YouTube, Instagram. So a lot of teens are using YouTube. Most of them actually 8%, and 32% of teens say that they use YouTube the most often. Secondly, Snapchat, in terms of most often usage by teens, is 35%. Actually, probably the largest percentage of teens use Snapchat over other social media types. You'll see Facebook is a fairly smaller percentage. A lot of teens, I'll mention this later, but a lot of younger generations view Facebook as sort of for the older generations, for their grandparents or their parents to kind of keep up with them. My grandmother just recently got a Facebook page, and so she's been able to keep up with us and see pictures and stuff. So that's great. But She really doesn't use it for much anything else. But so that's the way a lot of younger generations probably would envision that as well. So social media platforms like Snapchat, forgive me, I've got something in the way here. Social media platforms like Snapchat and Instagram are certainly popular with younger generations. This is again showing a percentage of adults in each age group who show that they use YouTube is 94%. Obviously, less people over the age of 50 use it less. And in general, the darker green dots, kind of more on the left side of these, would be the 50+ age group. So in general, they use the internet and use these different platforms less than others. But it's actually interesting that the 18 to 24-year-olds use Facebook less than 25 to 29, and almost the same as 30 to 49. So something to consider and think about when you're looking at Facebook. 71% of users visit multiple times per day. Again, I mentioned that. So it's very important to know that there's a lot of people using social medias very frequently. We're going to talk a little bit about Generation Z. I'm technically considered Generation Z, born in 1995 to 2010. We are the next generation after millennials. Some people would have me in 95 categorized as a millennial, but that's kind of the break off around 94, 96 in terms of where those are drawn. But these are still teenagers and preteens, as well as very young 20-year-olds today. So we'll talk a little bit about them. You're probably very well aware that they are likely to be tech savvy. Being the resident 25-year-old in my office, and Hal can attest to this, I'm the unofficial IT person that answers any questions that arise. Without having to take the time to contact our actual IT people, I'm generally able to help them out. So it's kind of funny that I've become that person, but it's just it's a part of younger generations growing up more surrounded by technology and phones and the internet. Generation Z is considered to be more pragmatic. They're certainly open-minded, very individualistic, and socially responsible is a way that they've been described based on this Business Insider study. They value their privacy. They prefer Snapchat and Instagram over others. Let's see. What age group is your primary target for farm fresh produce? I would assume middle age, as most young people are more fast food oriented. Scott, thank you for that question. It's certainly a good question, and it depends. Certainly, you can talk to others in your area, and depends on who you're trying to reach and how you're trying to reach them. In college at UT, I knew that there was certainly a large percentage of young 20s and teenagers that were fast food oriented, but there are a lot of the younger generations that have kind of cycled back around, thinking of kind of the social responsibility of a lot of things, and they have cycled back around to wanting to support local movements, local producers, and things like that. So don't just write off younger generations because a large percentage of them may not care, but you'll find there are a lot of younger people that do care about where their food comes from, how it's raised, if it's responsibly raised, and things like that. So they will also be great customers for you, and they'll be long-term customers because they are especially thinking of 20-something-year-olds as they graduate college or they finish high school and they start to get jobs. They start to have more disposable income than they are used to. So they would be more likely willing to spend that money on things like food and pay a higher premium for food that they can identify with and associate with. So certainly would think of maybe some middle-aged generations to look at in terms of kind of your core, in terms of being able to, those are the ones probably have the most disposable income. they've worked for numerous years, 20 so years. They have the money and the resources to be able to spend a little bit more on produce, buying locally. But if you can capture them just the same as you can capture younger generations, you'll do well capturing younger generations, because they will be the long-term customers. They will be the ones that will be around for, obviously they've got their whole lives ahead of them. So capturing them early certainly is a benefit. I hope I answered your question. Feel free to type in if you have any other questions, Scott or anyone else. Be happy to answer those as well. Otherwise, I'll keep moving here. So I mentioned the Generation Z, they value privacy and they prefer Snapchat and Instagram. I don't know how many of you are aware of Snapchat or how it kind of operates. The way that younger generations use Snapchat, and the benefit of Snapchat, is that whenever you send something or post something, it is not visible, or it does not somebody does not have access to it for an infinite amount of time if you choose to not let them. So you can limit something to 10 seconds or less so that they can view a picture or a video for a very short period of time, and then it's erased. Many of us are probably skeptics and are well aware that once you put something on the internet, then it's likely there forever, whether you believe it or not. But this is something that younger generations like to kind of cling to, thinking that they can be fun or kind of lighthearted with messages, and they don't feel that it's going to be around for a long time. Now, I'm not necessarily sure the kind of best approach to using Snapchat to market your business, but just know that if you are in the situation of trying to attract teenagers or the very younger generations, that's where you'll probably find them, and that's something that you would like to look into. Generation Z, like I mentioned, it's not cool to be on Facebook. They use it for group chats or to keep up with their parents and grandparents. But other than that, it's there's not really, they don't necessarily use it as much. They've moved on to other social media platforms. This quote here is that this cohort of teens, talking about Generation Z, is on track to kill Facebook. I don't necessarily believe that that'll be the case, but certainly Facebook will shift in terms of who is using it, and what other social media platforms will continue to grow in spite of Facebook. Pinterest is another social media platform that is pretty interesting to use. What's most notable about Pinterest is that a large percentage of women use the site. 41% of women say that they use Pinterest, compared to only 16% of men. And I believe that is going to continue to be the case. It is largely going to be more prominent for women than men who use it. So another thing to consider, if you, for some reason, are producing crafts that you're selling in a market, or you're doing something with your farm produce that you believe would be more identifiable with women, then you may look to start a Pinterest page and a Pinterest board and try to use that to market some of your products. It's interesting. A lot of women are drawn to Pinterest to look for ideas. And it's a very neat way to be able to categorize information. So if somebody uses Pinterest and they're interested, they like something, they can save it to a board, and then they can categorize information that they like in that way. And you as a marketer can do the same thing. You can use certain tags to try and draw people in to find your information, and you may it may be a good way to provide recipes if you're interested in trying to get people excited about what they can use your produce, or crafts. If you're trying to sell crafts or things like that, you can certainly use Pinterest. But again, the kind of key takeaway here is that more women are using Pinterest than men, almost 3 times as many more. We'll talk a little bit about Facebook. Start off with talking about the algorithm change. I mentioned algorithms when I talked about Google search optimization. Any of these internet or web-based things are going to be operating on algorithms. So whenever you're using Facebook and you post something, or you look at your friends' feed and you wonder how Facebook chooses what is going to be shown for you, this algorithm is what is behind all of that. So the change in the algorithm is intended to increase personal posts from your friends and family in your news feed. They're trying to drive a desire for engagement to be authentic. They're trying to discourage engagement bait, such as comment or tag a friend if, or share this post. And ultimately, kind of what this has done is it's decreased a little bit of the organic reach. And when I say organic reach, if you have any kind of business Facebook page, you'll see information. There's certain information that's made available to business pages or certain pages as to posts. So organic reach is reach that is done for free, that has just happened kind of naturally. So if you post something and your friends share it, and then their friends see it, that would be considered an organic reach, so that more people are seeing it, but you did not spend any money to make that happen. So the old way, in terms of measurement and in terms of the reach or number of people that will be attracted or be counted in this measurement, the old way was if 250 posts loaded whenever you log into Facebook. So say you just pull up Facebook on your browser on your computer, and it preloads a list of posts that it plans for you to see. And it's doing this because so as you scroll through them, you don't have to wait for it to load or buffer or anything like that. So they're just going to go ahead and load a bunch of them on there for you, for let you scroll on as fast as you want. In the past, if your post, if your business post was included in this 250 or whatever the number is, then it was counted as reach, whether that person actually viewed your post or not. The new way is only going to count as a single reach, if the post appears on the person's timeline and they scroll past it or they scroll through it. So that's different. So it's a more accurate way of determining how many people actually viewed your content, your information. If you shared something or posted something, it's a more accurate representation. So I think it's a good change to calculating the reach measurement. Again, they're going to be focusing on impressions and engagement. So if you have a link in your post and somebody clicks on that link, you'll be notified of how many people clicked on it. You'll see how many people reacted to it or shared it. So there's a lot of good resources on Facebook. Let's see. Scott has a question. Do you project that the COVID-19 pandemic will result in a huge long-term swing towards online fresh produce? Certainly, Scott, we're living in very uncertain times. I can't necessarily speak to the long-term outlook of what's going to happen in a post-COVID-19 situation. I do know that a lot of people are moving to online orders currently because of the pandemic and everything going on. It might be fair to say that as people try to use online ordering for produce and other groceries or other essentials, then they may be more apt to do it in the future. So this has been kind of a way to push people into a new mode of purchasing or making purchases that they may not have done in the past. So you may see likely on the tail end of this, there likely will be more people that have the knowledge of buying things online, are more comfortable with it because they were able to use it and it got them through this pandemic. So there may be an uptick in the number of people that are using it long term, but certainly can't take my word for it. Just some kind of thoughts that I've had around that space. But it will be interesting to monitor and see how the use of online ordering continues in a post-COVID-19 pandemic society, which we all hope is much sooner than later. So if there's any other questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, I'll keep going. I'm going to talk a little bit about some strategies on Facebook when you're posting. We encourage that you try to create meaningful content. We're certainly looking for quality over quantity I know that if I see somebody posting a bunch of stuff that has no relevance or just is kind of boring or lackluster for any reason, then I'm just going to move on past it, and it's not really going to grab my attention. And it may even approach the level of kind of annoying, and I may choose to not follow them anymore. So you certainly want to think about the purpose that you're trying to have with your post, and trying to do the best way of getting as much quality in those posts, instead of just posting a ton of things that don't really have any quality. If you can naturally start conversations in your posts, then I think that will really kind of boost the post's reach and sharing capacity. It's certainly a good idea if you want to encourage people to post pictures. If you're a farm vendor, if you have customers that you know that are also kind of hobby gardeners and they're growing a few things at home, but they also come to the market to purchase other products, tell them to post pictures of what their garden's looking like. Ask them if they're having troubles with certain things related to weather. We just had a cold snap last night, so I'm sure a lot of people are having issues with maintaining to avoiding frost and freezing on their produce. So talk to them about that. Get their input on that. You'll keep them engaged. It'll kind of build a level of trust between your customers and you as a farmer. So you can kind of work through that, and you'll build trust and other relationships that'll help you long term. Again, you want to be kind of relevant and timely with your topics. Don't be posting about COVID-19 next year. If it's done and gone away, there's no need to try and make a COVID-19 sale or discount sale related to it if it's a year in the past and nobody's really thinking about it anymore. So as just a silly example, but just to try and think about how to be timely with your messages. And you want to respond to comments. If somebody's going to comment on your page or on your post, you want to be seen as approachable, as easygoing, easy to get along with, very open to talk to. And one way to do that is by responding to every comment that comes through, whether it's a simple thank you for purchasing or thank you for your suggestion or your tips, to having potential discussion or debate, if you will, if somebody has kind of issues or concerns the way something is done or the way you're handling something. Be willing to have those discussions with people to a certain extent. At a certain point, that they may just become trolls or just somebody that's trying to disrupt your daily lives or your business flow. And so there's a certain point with certain people that you would just ignore or you would just block. But for the most part, you want to be open to commenting and communicating with your followers. Some other things that you can do are develop a Facebook group. So not only do you have a page, but maybe you have a Facebook group. I know a lot of farmers markets have a group where all the vendors can log in to the group, and they can post information. They can see if the market is having to make any changes due to COVID-19 or what have you. It's a really good way to stay connected with peers, and you can also create a group of people that are interested in buying your products. So that say you're selling produce and you have a group, and people are thinking, well, I'm not really sure if I want to buy this sweet corn. How have other people liked it, and how have other people liked it that bought it recently? And you'll have other people come in and comment and say this is their best sweet corn. They say it every year, but this truly is the best sweet corn they've ever produced. This is a great crop. You should totally buy it. And that's a way to get your customers to kind of help promote you through that group. So it's a good way to keep people engaged, keep them active, and it keeps your company, your farm, your business on their mind. Facebook, as a for-profit company, certainly has options to where you can pay to play, to be able to boost your posts. Facebook has means of charging, I think it's $20 or so, which has certainly increased, and I'll talk about that later. You can pay $20 to boost your post or to advertise certain things on Facebook. And it's pretty amazing to think of as a kind of a tech person, the amount of information that Facebook and Google and others have on us. It's wild to think about. Most of us don't realize. But Facebook is, in a way, that's beneficial to you as a business, as a farmer, if you're trying to use Facebook to reach a very specific demographic. You can use targeted ads that will, you can designate male, female, you can designate gender, you can designate age group, income level, education level, a lot of different criteria based on demographics. And you can really drill down to a very specific person. If you know who your target demographic is, then that is an amazing way to use Facebook to reach that target demographic that would be interested in buying your product. So certainly something to consider if you are looking to spend some money. It's one area to try out, would be using Facebook paid advertising. When we're thinking about social media, regardless of the page or the platform that we're using, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, we want to make sure that we're delivering a value, we're delivering good content, good quality content. And I talked about this yesterday. I'm a very big proponent of being able to tell your story, your farm story, whether again, I mentioned it yesterday, if you're on a century farm or you're a seventh generation farmer, maybe you're a first generation farmer. You have a story to tell. There's a uniqueness about you and about your operation that people would be interested in hearing about. And so if you can find a way to creatively tell your story, certainly is a great way to draw people in, build a trust factor with them. If you can engage your customers with quizzes and polls, showing videos are all great ways to engage your customers. It'll get them to be involved on your page and more likely to come back and look at your page again or look for your posts in the future. And you also want to be transparent about your purpose. Obviously, as a for-profit business or a hopeful for-profit business, as many farmers would like to be, certainly you're looking to make sales and to generate profits and revenues. So it's okay to be transparent and say that sure, we're here to make money and trying to grow our business. But there's ways that you can do that are beneficial for your customers and you. When you think about posting on social media, I like to use the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, I would like for you to inform, educate, or entertain your followers, and only 20% of the time should you be selling. The purpose of this is if you're just 100% of the time posting things for sale or trying to sell things to people, they're going to get tired of seeing those. If they're not interested at the time, they're just going to pass on, and they may even get, like I mentioned before, they may even get tired and annoyed of your constant post about trying to sell them something, that they just unfollow you or they just don't get any value out of it. So they stop following and they unlike you or something, and they don't want to see your information anymore. And that reduces the number of people that would be potentially seeing your information, and that would not be a good thing. So when I talk about informing and educating, we're looking to create posts. Maybe you're doing a Facebook Live or you're posting pictures from your farm. A good timely example would be the real cold snap that we had last night, and you could talk about how that has impacted your production, maybe the management practices that you had to take to ensure that your crops were going to stay safe and not be destroyed or damaged or hindered by the cold snaps that we've been having. At one is it's informing them of your production practices, and it's also educating them if they're hobby growers of how they may be adjusting their production practices as well. So you're providing them more value than just trying to sell them produce or sell them something at a farmer's market. And they're going to thank you for that, and they're going to reward you in more sales in the future. Also, just in terms of, in general, thinking of social media, visual content is king. Visual content generates more views. It will likely get you more likes and more shares. I personally, as I'm scrolling through Facebook or whatever, I'm more apt to look at a picture first because it just really kind of pops out at me. And if the picture intrigues me, then I'm going to take time to read and see what other information is there. But if it's just a long block of text that doesn't really hook me as I'm scrolling through, then I'm just going to keep going past it. So certainly something to think about as well. Looking at Facebook and Twitter, when you add visual content, the number of engagements and shares for Facebook increased quite a bit, 70% more shares and 2.3 times more engagement on average. And then Twitter, about 150% more retweets or sharing of that information. Images and GIFs are certainly a good way to kind of be lighthearted and funny with your text. If you do have long blocks of text, certainly be inclined to include GIFs or images to kind of, if you don't necessarily have a picture, these are good ways to kind of color up your post, if you will. Millennials actually prefer emojis and GIFs and stickers over words. They're pretty quick to know what they mean and can go from there. I did have a lady point out several weeks ago, whenever we did these in person, that if you're not very familiar with many GIFs or emojis, you might want to do a little research on some of them. There are some innuendos that can probably be drawn from certain GIFs or emojis that you may not be thinking about, but someone who spends more time looking at them or in different circles has probably picked up on. Probably don't want to use those. And you might want to look for something else. So just something to consider, to think about if you're going to be using images and GIFs. Make sure that they don't have any innuendos or something that might draw on a different response from people. Video marketing is actually is highly encouraged in nowadays. We're seeing a much larger trend for video marketing. It's accounting for almost 80% of internet traffic by 2020. Think about it, if you're scrolling through Facebook or whatever, you're not necessarily seeing picture ads anymore. You're starting to see very short videos, 30 seconds or a minute or something, that's trying to draw your attention. And that number has increased quite a bit since 2015. Daily video usage. YouTube has the most hours of videos watched, with 1 billion hours, billion with a B, hours of video watched on YouTube every day. Facebook has 100 million hours of videos watched on Facebook daily, and that number is increasing. And then there are billions of video views on Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat. And Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat have shorter videos. Again, like Snapchat I mentioned, are 10 seconds. Instagram has a lot of stories that are 30 seconds or less. And then Twitter has very short ones. So there's a lot of views on those as well for videos. So a lot of people watching videos out there. And why do we want to use videos? Well, consumers prefer videos over text. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth 1,000 pictures, right? So, and if you look at the frames per second and whatever, if you want to get real technical, then it probably is a video maybe worth several thousand pictures, but we don't have to get technical with that. Social media algorithms actually favor video content. If you think about it from the perspective of Facebook or Instagram, their motive, their goal is to keep their users on their platform for as long as possible. And a video is a great way of doing that. If you were looking at a picture, so using me for example, if I see a block of text and I don't necessarily feel the time to read it, I'm just going to scroll right past it. It took maybe 1 second or a half a second to blow past that post. If I see a picture with a little bit of text, I'll stop at the picture, look at it for a couple seconds, and I may take the time, a few more seconds, to read what goes along with it. Okay, so maybe I've used 10 seconds. But if I scroll through and I see a video that is intriguing and I start watching and I get hooked, and the video may be 5 minutes, So I may get hooked on watching that video that's 5 minutes. Let's see, I've got a question from the entire Powell family. Hello, Mark and girls. Hope you all are doing well. They are asking, how long should the videos be? There's really no set time. It depends on what kind of video you're doing and where you're putting that video. If you're doing a YouTube video, it can certainly be hour or more. It can be a long video. If you're probably looking to put something on Facebook, on your Facebook page, it really kind of depends. It doesn't have to be very long. Really, as long as you can get your message across in a concise way that still is informative, that would be good. Maybe you're using Instagram or Facebook stories and you're only posting maybe a 30-second video or a minute video. Maybe you're doing a Facebook Live and you've prepared for that, and we'll talk about that more. But maybe if you're using Facebook Live, you can do 5 or 10 minutes or something and engage with people that way. But then that video would also be available for people to watch afterwards as a video on demand. So yeah, it really kind of depends on where you're looking to put where you're trying to put that video and what kind of information you're trying to get across in that video. So Denise Skelton is saying that Five Mary's Farm on Instagram and Facebook is a great example of social media marketing there in California. So thank you, Denise, for that suggestion. Maybe some would like to go take a look at that on Instagram and Facebook and see how they operate. You certainly want to look at your peers and competitors in the industries and see how they're using these social media platforms. They're certainly more inundated with it than I am. From a business perspective, to try and draw attention and make sure the engagement stays up. So thank you for that, and thank you for the question. So the importance of videos is that it tells a compelling story and it does it in a quick way. But social media companies, they like videos because it hooks your attention for longer, which keeps you on their platform longer. Which keeps you off of other platforms, or it just kind of keeps you hooked, right? So that's why they like videos. This here says if you feature yourself or your company employees in the video, I talked about this trust factor. It kind of builds this level of trust between you as a company and your customers, and they feel more inclined to purchase from you because they have a more personal connection with you. So videos do a great job of that as well. I mentioned Facebook Live events. There's some real benefits to Facebook Live. There's some downplays to it, to things to think about, such as a good kind of positive is that it'll notify all of your followers to attend whenever you go live. It'll save the video for future views. So if somebody doesn't get to watch it immediately when you're live, they can still watch it later as a video on demand or a VOD. This is saying that live videos get 6 times as many interactions as regular videos because it's a real neat way for you to interact one-on-one or very personally with people that are in the chat that are watching you, and you can reply to them real time, just like I'm able to reply to your questions or your comments real time. You could do this on Facebook with Facebook Live and have video of you doing something on the farm. Maybe you're out in the fields or you're out in the pastures and you're doing something on the farm, and you want to just take a few minutes to video what you're doing and talk about it and engage with people. Let them know why you're tending to the fields the way you are, why you're doing certain production practices, why you're moving the sheep from one field to another, and talking about rotational grazing or something like that as a production practice are some good examples of things. You do want to be careful when using Facebook Live. You want to make sure that you're professional about the way you present yourself. You don't want it to just kind of be informal and people look at it and think, well, what's this hick on the farm doing? He's just walking around shaking his camera and giving me a headache. I don't want to watch this. So you certainly want to think about how you're presenting yourself using Facebook Live. Certainly it is a good tool, but you want to do some research and study about some best practices when you're using Facebook Live. Like I mentioned, not shaking your phone around because it may not look like it's really bouncing for you because you're just kind of holding it and walking and talking. But somebody that's sitting still in a chair and their screen's going crazy because they're trying to watch you, it may give them a headache, and they probably would have to close it out or shut it out because they don't want to watch it. So thinking through some kind of little nuances like that certainly to be considered. Here's a few best practices resources for doing Facebook videos. Facebook media blog video best practices is something to look at if you're interested. Instagram is another social media platform. Again, I mentioned it's owned by Facebook. Instagram really thrives on using photos and video sharing as opposed to maybe words or text. An interesting thing for Instagram, similar to Twitter, is the use of hashtags to sort content and prioritize certain posts. And it's a way to get your information, if you deem it with if you add a certain hashtag to it, people that are looking for that specific hashtag that may not have a clue of who you are or your company, if they're looking for the hashtag that you've used, they very likely will be able to find your information, and it may be exactly what they're looking for. They just didn't even know you existed. But because of a hashtag, you can bridge that gap. Here's an example of goats that are on for sale on Instagram. I believe you're unable to sell live animals on Facebook Marketplace. That's not allowed on Facebook, but it is okay on Instagram. So here is a farm that is marketing goats for sale, and they've used different hashtags. It's kind of an interesting. If you look at the hashtags, first one is goats for sale, so that's kind of the most predominant, kind of the clearest hashtag for what they're trying to do, selling goats. But the second one is pretty funny. It's interesting to think about. Hashtag baby goats. If you're like me and you see a video of baby goats jumping all over cars and climbing all kinds of things and just being silly and cute, you kind of get hooked. And there's a lot of people that just like watching baby animals do funny things, and it just kind of is a light-hearted way to pass time. So this farm is capitalizing on that, and they're using the hashtag baby goats. Maybe somebody's on Instagram, they just want to find cute baby goat videos, and they're looking hashtag baby goat, and they come across these goats for sale, and they're thinking, oh, I didn't know you could buy goats on Instagram. I may buy a goat. I want to get my own little cute baby goat. So it's just a clever way to try and attract more people. Something to think about and consider, and especially this is a good example of how to use hashtags. Asking, do hashtags work the same way on Facebook as they do on Instagram? I believe so. I don't really use hashtags on Facebook, but I think if you're using hashtags on Instagram and you're linking your account over to Facebook, then those could be there. It's probably not as robust of a search tool on Facebook, and it may not necessarily get you to specifically where you're trying to go as compared to Instagram, but I do believe that they do work. So thank you for that. And Deborah is asking, which is the best marketing practice to use when you are solo and labor challenged? That is a great question. I think Facebook is a very easy, you were active on Facebook and you could not keep up. I guess if you could probably provide a little more detail, could you not keep up with responding to people's comments, or did you just not have time during the day to post a picture or video? How are you unable to keep up? It was with sales. Okay. So you were trying to sell through Facebook. Well, certainly not having enough time to keep up with sales is probably a good challenge to have. Some people probably wish they had so many sales that they couldn't keep up with it. But I would encourage if you tried to do some more automated approach. If you had a website that could send somebody through to, they can make a purchase and then you just see it, as opposed to maybe having to have a longer conversation, one-on-one conversation to ultimately get at what they're trying to buy and then fulfill that sale. If there's a little bit of automation to that, then that might help you. Not necessarily sure your specific situation. In terms of using Facebook to market your products, now you receive texts, you have a Southern accent, and you don't like your voice. Well, I'm sure your Southern accent is perfectly all right, and many people would love to hear it. But in terms of using Facebook for marketing, I would encourage, if you don't have time kind of during the day to take time out of the field or something to make a post or try and spend time thinking about a post, I would encourage you to constantly be taking pictures while you're working, or taking a short video while you're working of things. Just take a minute to pause and do that, and then hold on to those pictures and videos. And then say come the weekend or something, or you just when you have a downtime, Sunday afternoon or something, if you're really not busy, you may have an opportunity to get on Facebook, and you can create posts that will be published later, and you can schedule those posts. So then you could plan out the whole week, the upcoming week of posts you could do on Sunday. And then you would just make maybe 7 posts and schedule them to be released at whatever time on each day. And then you'll just let the Facebook automatically post those. So that's a great way to kind of, if you have a few hours to really focus on Facebook, and then maybe not have to think about it for a few days, but still keep on logging in and making sure that you're not missing anybody's comments or getting back to them. You'd like to get back to them in a timely manner and have that conversation. So thinking about hashtags on Instagram, you're very welcome, Deborah. Talking about hashtags on Instagram, it will grow the number of followers potentially. If you can switch it up, it probably is best to use different hashtags. If you're just always using the exact same hashtags, it may likely lead to spam, and somebody may not see them. You can certainly have your core hashtags, such as your farm name or your farm logo, and maybe a few others that are very pertinent to what you're trying to get across. But then be willing to change up kind of the last minute hashtags, or the kind of the lower seated hashtags. You can certainly change those up every now and then. Users can follow specific hashtags, and they'll be so they can see posts that appear on their feeds related to that hashtag, and that's a way to, like I mentioned, attract new potential followers. Somebody that may have never heard of you before, but because you used a hashtag that they follow, they found you, and can be attracted that way. But users can also mark content as to not show information related to a certain hashtag, and that would be a way that if you're only using the same hashtags, they may block those, and you may lose out on them seeing you if they think it's not interesting or relevant. You certainly want to test a different number of hashtags to see what works best. There is an Instagram limit of 30 hashtags per post, which I think is very high. I certainly wouldn't encourage you going past maybe 25 max. I would even use less if you don't want to clutter it up too much. Because if you clutter it up, it gets really full, and then there's not really room for followers to comment with a hashtag, and it kind of gets limited that way as well. You want to choose the hashtags that are going to work best to reach your target audience, make sure they're relevant. You also want to check each hashtag before you use it to make sure it's not banned or broken. And like I mentioned with emojis and GIFs, you want to type in a hashtag to see what else is out there related to that hashtag, to make sure that you're not using a hashtag that has devolved into an innuendo or some alternative meaning that you're not aware of. So you want to be careful with which ones that you're using, because you may be attracting people, or you may be pushing something that you don't necessarily believe in or want to be pushing. So you need to be careful with what hashtags you're using, and you want to check them. I also encourage you to gather, to follow hashtags, because you may likely come up with new hashtag suggestions, things to use. And you can encourage others with your same interests. You can kind of be a follower for others, and you can learn how your peers are using Facebook or Instagram and learn from them. You can also follow your own hashtag to see how your farm hashtag is, how the activity is going. So that's a really good technique to do as well for Instagram. I mentioned earlier that organic reach is getting more and more difficult and is becoming less effective than paid advertising. But I also said that the prices are increasing for paid advertising on different social media platforms. More companies are seeing the benefits and are realizing the value of these social media platforms and internet. So they're putting more and more marketing dollars into the social media advertising space. And Economics 101 will say that with increased demand will increase prices if the supply stays the same. So we're going to be seeing higher prices because of increased demand in terms of advertising costs. So be on the lookout for that. It has increased a good bit over the years already, and it will likely continue to climb. Customer reviews, regardless of social media platform, whether it's Google reviews or Facebook reviews, or anything like that, reviews are very important. Especially the more reviews you have and the better reviews that you have, the more likely, the higher you would appear in search rankings. Half of adults under the age of 50 regularly check online reviews before purchasing items. If I asked you to raise your hands for how many of you check on Amazon for reviews, because that's just an easy way to find reviews for products, I imagine most of you would be raising your hands right now, because it's just what we do. We like to read about other customers and other customer experiences with a product before we want to make a purchase, because we don't necessarily believe what the manufacturer or what the business is telling us. We want to hear it from other customers. This applies to you as a farm business and as a marketer for your farm products. You want to generate reviews in a good way, and you need to be able to have a plan in place of how you want to generate additional reviews. You don't want to incentivize people. You don't want to tell them that they're going to get a discount or you're going to pay them to give a good review, because they may very well likely put in that review that they got paid to leave a good review. And that does not look well, and that certainly does not bode well for your trust factor with your customers. So if you can, one good way, I think somebody asked, how do we try to generate additional reviews? And I would just encourage you, if you're meeting with people, or if you have customers that have a great experience and they seem very enthused and thankful for your service and for your products when you're working with them, whether it's at a market or a roadside stand, encourage them to look you up on Google reviews and leave a good review. Just ask them to do it. You can be blatantly honest and say you'd like to have more good reviews, and it's another way for them to kind of help you out, other than by paying you money or something. By leaving a good review, it's free for them to do, and it doesn't take too much time at all. Certainly a good way to go to get more reviews. I know whenever we did these workshops in person, we had people asking about using TripAdvisor or things like that. So a farmer's market or an agritourism enterprise could have a TripAdvisor page, or I'm trying to think of some of the others, but there's ways to leave reviews on there as well. So you can encourage people to go there and leave a review for your farm or your agritourism operation, or even a farmer's market as an entity could have a page that people could leave a review for and give compliments to specific vendors or the market as a whole. So those are another avenue for people to leave reviews, to send people and encourage them to read about you. I mentioned email marketing, so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about email. Yelp, yes, that could be a good suggestion. I think a little bit ties more to the food side, but if you're selling fresh produce, then Yelp may be a good option to get involved with. But I do think that it kind of trends more towards kind of restaurant side. I would have to look a little bit more into Yelp, but that would be a good suggestion for somebody to consider. So staying connected with email, if you generate a customer database with names, emails, and other contact information, you can send out periodic emails to a certain list of customers. These customers that are willing to be on your email list are probably likely returning customers or somebody that's interested in learning more about you. This is probably the reason that they would sign up in the first place. So know that and try to find ways to engage them via email and encourage them to shop or something based on sales that you may be providing at certain times. You can do e-news messages or newsletters. There's certain email, basic emails, message handlers such as Constant Contact or MailChimp and others provide some analytics. They're free for a limited kind of light version, if you will. You can certainly pay. They have additional analytics and additional information, additional benefits if you're willing to pay for them, but they have free services as well. I encourage you, if you're trying to collect information if you're trying to collect names and emails, I would encourage you to make it easy for them to sign up. Don't ask for too much information. Keep it pretty simple. Just ask for their name, maybe first and last name, and their email address. You don't need any more information than that. Don't ask them for their address. Don't ask them for a phone number. Don't ask them for a social security number or anything like that, because that was a joke. But because they're not, they're less likely to give you that kind of personal information, and they may be turned off by trying to give you that much information. So keep it very kind of high level and just get a name and an email address. That's all you really need. And make sure to let them know that what's in it for them. Whenever they sign up for it, tell them that they may be getting a discount code or something for their very next purchase, or be on the lookout for special deals in the future, or to be notified when the market's open or when the markets are ending at the end of the season, stuff like that. Scott is asking, will all social media exposure create large amounts of unwanted or unexpected farm visits, which result in wasted time and a reduction in productivity? That could be the case. I wouldn't necessarily that's going to be the case for everyone. If you are limited on ability to handle people coming to your farm or something, you could certainly limit that. You wouldn't have to necessarily provide a farm address. You can provide maybe the town that your farm is located in, but you don't necessarily have to give an address of where somebody could reach you. So that would cut out anybody that would unexpectedly show up on your farm. On the flip side of that, though, if you do draw attention and you do draw additional exposure on social media to get people wanting to come out to your farm, that opens an entirely different capacity of ways to monetize that attention through agritourism, pick your own, and a lot of other things. So there are numerous ways to monetize that and actually build on your revenue streams and diversify your operation rather than just selling produce. But you can create an agritourism venture or something else out of that. But if you do wind up having a large number of people that want to visit your farm in person, so consider it an opportunity and not necessarily just something to shy away from. Christina says, I get more people asking to visit my farm at the market rather than social media. Social media allows people to come visit your farm virtually. Social media allows people to experience your farm without having to see it in person. That is all very true. That is a great comment. Thank you. So like I mentioned about going live, doing a Facebook Live, or even just sharing videos of when you're walking around the farm, it's a great way for people to kind of connect with you on a personal level and feel like they've been to your farm, feel like they've seen where the produce that they're buying is grown, and they know how the production practices are going. So that is certainly a great way if you can include videos on social media, or even just pictures of your fields, pictures of your barns or anything like that, of your livestock if you have livestock. Capture all those moments and share them with people, because people love to see it and they love to know where their food comes from. That's a trend that's going to keep growing, I think, is accountability and knowing where your food comes from. So if you can capitalize on that and stuff, that's great. So certainly thank you for that message. So getting back to emails, again, if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in there and I'll be happy to answer them. But thinking about email basics, you want the emails to be exciting and appealing, a subject line, because that's really the first thing that somebody's going to see is the subject line when it pops up in their email list. You want to make it sound like you're addressing the individual directly. You want to make them feel like you're personally talking to them and not just kind of don't make it feel like it's just an email that's being blasted out to 200 people or 1,000 people or something. You want to have a short message with a clear focus. People don't want to read long, lengthy emails. Sometimes we have to do that for work, and that's really the extent of the long, lengthy emails we want to read. So we don't want to see them in our off time either. You want to have a call to action. There needs to be some sort of action that you're trying to drive them to. Maybe it's encouraging them to come to the opening of the market for the season, or encouraging them to come out because there's only 2 weeks left in the market before you no longer have any produce to provide. You want to have a signature. You want to make sure that they know who you are and make it clear that who they're getting an email from. And you want to provide information for how they can contact you on the web, via phone, or social media, so they can reach back out to you. You certainly want to double check for spelling and grammar errors. The picture I had yesterday of the roach and ant killer, spelled A-U-N-T, the wrong kind of ant. Certainly want to check for grammar and spelling errors, because that will be easily pointed out and noticed by people on an email. Don't include attachments in your emails, because we've all sort of been trained kind of professionally and personally to not open attachments from email sources that we don't trust because of phishing and other malware and hacking scam or things that are going on. We've really been trained not to open attachments from unknown emails, and if you still do open those attachments, I would encourage you not to, just as a public service announcement. Don't open unknown attachments. Keep going. So you want to be able to offer them an opt-out method at the very bottom of the page or somewhere on that email. You need to have a link or something that allows them to unsubscribe from that. If you don't have a kind of formal method of allowing somebody to opt out, you can just stay in your signature at the bottom of the email. Say, please just reply to this email or email so-and-so and let them know that you want to be removed from the list. And that's a pretty simple way. It would be a little time consuming or increased labor demand if you have to go through and manually take somebody out, but that may be the best case. Thinking how I mentioned, you want your web pages to be mobile friendly. You also want your emails to be mobile friendly. You don't want to have a picture that's going to pop up real wide. You want to make sure that it'll fit in a mobile email, so it's still viewable. And if you can include GIFs or videos or something in that don't necessarily pop up as an attachment, then that might be a good way to encourage people as well. So I've talked about a lot of trends and a lot of tips for how to use social media and use the internet. But I do encourage you to constantly be keeping up with changes that are happening in social media and the internet. So Social Media Examiner, Marketing Profs, HubSpot, Social Media Today, the Pew Research Center, which is where a lot of information for this came from. Getting Google alerts and watching different kind of YouTube videos are all great ways of keeping up with upcoming trends and adapting so that you stay relevant and you stay current in the online space. I mentioned it a couple times. I continue to encourage you to follow your peers and maybe follow other peers regardless of where they're located in the country. They may not even be in your county or your state, but if you believe that they're doing a great job and have a great online social media presence, follow them and learn from them. They're providing you free education by them posting and sharing and communicating with people online, and that's free for you to learn from. So certainly take that time as well. And with that, I'll leave you my contact information and ask if there are any additional questions. Please feel free to include that. I'd love to answer them and communicate and talk with you. But if you have future questions, the office phone number is located here, and my email address is jmbruhin, BRUHIN, at utk.edu. Please feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions or help that you have, and I would love to help you. Erica Alexander has clarified and a reminder that in order to receive credit for the TAEP producer diversification, you must attend the live webinar. The live chat box is recorded, and the list of those participants that respond for TAEP credit will have records and verify that you attended. If you've been calling and listening in and have been, you need to email Erica Alexander at tn.gov daily to record your attendance, and she is able to see their phone numbers, so when they are live on the webinar, to verify. Unfortunately, she's not able to verify those that go back and watch past videos. Therefore, they are unable to accept those as attendance at this time. So thank you, Erica, for that and that clarification. Again, I'll be around for a little while to answer any questions. And Erica clarified again, you must attend all 4 webinars to receive 1 credit. It's not a 1 per 1 on each webinar. So thank you, Erica. And I'll turn it back over to Hal if he's got any final comments.
Okay, well, thank you, Jared, for sharing this important information about recommendations for digital marketing. Very, very helpful. If you joined us late, please be sure and enter your name and location in the chat box so we have a record of your attendance. And we hope everyone will join us tomorrow when we'll learn about some food product cost and pricing tools. Again, we appreciate you being with us, and we ask once again if you would please complete the brief online evaluation at the link provided. You can cut and paste that link into your browser and it'll take you to the evaluation. I'll put it in the chat box again just so you'll have that and can see it. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording now.